We are at a very exciting part of the quarter, in my opinion, for reasons that I will explain right now. Basically, at this point, with what we've learned so far, we're basically done with deep dives into single concepts. We spent a week on just rhythm. We spent a week on major scales, a week on minor scales, a week on building chords, etc. This week is all about breadth, is all about exploring different things and different options. So it's going to be far more conceptual and far more loose of a framework, because now that we know what a chord is, we know what a melody is, we know what scales are, rhythm, we can just start looking at things from a bird's eye view, and we don't have to be so specific and nitty gritty with things. So today is kind of the last day. We're going to be doing a lot of, okay, now you build a chord, and okay, now you do this, now you do that, because this week we're moving on to talking about harmony in more detail. So the first step in that process is what we're going to talk about today, which is a concept that's called chordal extensions. Chordal extensions. We know now what chords are. We spent a week focusing just on triads, on a specific kind of chord. We're going to take that to the next step today and move beyond just 3 notes in a chord to include more than 3 notes in, a single instance. So before we talk about chordal extensions, let's do a bunch of review from last week. First off, let's review the process for identifying and writing triads. Let's stay root position for now, and then we'll do some practice of inversions, which was the topic of last Thursday's talk. So, for instance, we have a triad here. We know that triads can be augmented, diminished, major, or minor. The way that we determine the quality depends on the intervals from the root, which when our notes are configured like this, in our little snowman form, in our compact root position form, the root is also the note on the bottom. So for this chord, we have a G flat, a B flat, and a D natural. So G flat up to B flat, if we were to think back to our major and minor scales, we would discover that G flat up to B flat is a major third. That narrows us down to one of 2 options, either an augmented chord or a major chord. So now the quality of the fifth is what determines it. G flat up to D natural. Is that a perfect fifth, a diminished fifth, an augmented fifth? If we think about G flat major or G flat minor, the fifth would be the same in either case. We should have a D flat. So if we've taken a perfect fifth and raised it, we've got an augmented fifth. So this first chord right here is a G flat augmented. For our first one, we use lead sheet symbols for that. Lead sheet symbols, of course, go on top. They have the root name. If it's augmented, you just have the root name plus a plus sign. If it's a major chord, it's just the floating root. If it's a minor chord, it's the root with a lowercase m. And if it's a diminished chord, it's a root with a lowercase o. Now, try the same thing. I just kind of walked through very quickly the process for identifying triad qualities, things like that. Try the same thing now, but add back in the element of Roman numerals. Remember that Roman numerals are a way to assign chords to scale degrees. They tie them to a key. So I've given you the key signature, and I've told you that it's a major. So knowing that this is a major key signature, what is this chord? So you'll need to know its quality, and you'll also need to be able to write down its scale degree as a Roman numeral. So take 30 seconds and try this one out right here. Okay, go ahead and type in the chat what your answer should be. I'm looking for a Roman numeral. It'll be a number 1 through 7. Make it uppercase or lowercase as needed, and add any other symbols as needed. What is the Roman numeral for this chord right here in the key of E flat major? Okay, I see 2. Other guesses? I also see 2. It is, in fact, 2. E flat, F. Well, there's our root. That's handy. It's a 2 of some kind. Now, the two answers in the chat were lowercase. That would suggest that it's a minor chord. We can see that F up to A flat is a minor third and F up to C is a perfect fifth. So that is, in fact, a minor chord. If you also were at this point, you could also memorize which chords are which quality in a major system, but that's quite all right too. So excellent. 2. Try this one out. Now we're in a minor key, F sharp minor. Give me the Roman numeral for this. Take 30 seconds. Okay, so let me talk through this one. With this being in root position, we know that the root of this chord is A. If we think of F sharp minor, F sharp, G sharp, A. This is a scale degree 3 chord. So it'll be a 3 of some kind. Is it uppercase, lowercase, augmented, diminished? A up to C sharp is a major third. A up to E is a perfect fifth. This is a major chord. This would be a capital 3 would be your answer, just like that. So now let's try writing the chord. Try writing a chord. I'm giving you F sharp diminished. So write out for me the 3 notes of an F sharp diminished triad. You can either write them out on a piece of manuscript paper, or you can just think of just what the 3 notes would be if it were an F sharp diminished triad. This is a lead sheet symbol bereft of key context. Take 30 seconds. Okay, to review, a diminished triad is a minor third from the root and a diminished fifth from the root. What are the 3 notes we need to make an F sharp diminished triad? Drop them in the chat. Okay, I see one response. Other responses? There's some consensus so far. Okay. A little bit of difference. So F sharp is one of those 3 notes. We have F sharp, we have A natural, we have C natural. F, G, A, B, C. That gives us a fifth. So yes, F sharp, A natural, C natural, diminished. Pardon me, F sharp diminished. Now, G major. G major. What is the 4 chord in G major? So go ahead and give me, again, you could either write this out on manuscript paper, think about your key signature, and think about your scale degrees. So what is the 4 chord in G major? 30 seconds. Okay, let's keep this pretty simple right now. What is the root of the chord we need? C, 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 C. Indeed, great. G, A, B, C. If we flesh out a chord using just the diatonic pitches of G major, we would get a C major chord. And that's what we're looking for. Okay, great. Try another one now. B flat minor, B flat minor. Think of your key signature. We need the 5 chord. Hint, look at the quality of the 5 chord. 30 seconds. What are the 3 notes we need for the 5 chord in B flat minor? What are the 3 notes that we need? Drop them in chat. Okay, so far so good. Some agreements. Yeah, so B flat minor has an A flat in its key signature, and that would give you a minor 5. However, you were asked for the major 5, and if you recall, scale degree 7 in minor keys often gets raised, which means that we need to make that a natural. So F, A natural, and C. If you were to put F, A flat, and C, that would be mostly correct, but technically incorrect. That would not be the chord we're looking for. We're looking for a major chord on scale degree 5, so we need to raise up that 3rd. Okay, great. Any questions on triads? We need to have a pretty solid grasp of triads and their qualities before we move on to what we're doing today. And we're going to talk about inversions just for some review in a second. Inversion will factor in far less heavily today than it did on Thursday, but it will still be a thing that happens from time to time. Okay, let's do some inversion practice. Let's do 4 of these. Identify the root, the quality, and the inversion for the following chords. I'm giving you the key signature, and I'm giving you whether it's major or minor. So remember, you need to rearrange the notes to keep track of your unique pitches and look for its snowman form. Look for its root position form. That gives you the root, and then compare that to what you have. So give me lead sheet symbols and give me Roman numerals. So lead sheets and Roman numerals. Let's start by taking a minute for this. If we need more time, we'll reassess. Okay, so take a minute, try it out. So drop in the chat. Would you like more time? Yes or no? You can just do Y or N, and feel free to private message me if you want. No, if we're ready to go on. Yeah, okay, I see a yes. Great. Okay, sure. Take 30 more seconds. 30 more seconds. Okay. let me talk through this one. So we know our key is B flat major. This is not in snowman form. It's not in root position. Or rather, we don't know if it's a new position. We have to rearrange it to just double check. Okay, well, if we move D down an octave, we still have a space between B flat and F. But if we move F up an octave, oh, we'd get a snowman form where B flat's in the bottom. Well, B flat in the key of B flat is 1. And if it's B flat major, we know that it's a B flat major chord. So we have a capital Roman numeral 1 and a B flat on top. So that's good. For our inversion, we have to remember to put a slash for our lead sheets. So it's slash F to show that this is a one chord over F. And we can just write second inversion below our Roman numeral because the root position is nothing. The first inversion is when the third is in the bass, and the second inversion is when the fifth is in the bass. So that looks like this. Pardon me. B flat major over F, one chord and second inversion. Okay, try this one out. Take a minute and a half for this one. Notice we have more notes now, so you'll have to sift for unique pitches and then rearrange. I thought B flat was the third on that one. So B flat looks like it's in the middle, but this is the thing. We don't know exactly what's the root. So it's hard to tell what's the root, the third or the fifth. We have to rearrange it to figure out what the root of the chord is. And when we rearrange F up here, we see that B flat is the root, which makes D the third and F the fifth. Does that make sense? That's a great question. Sort of. That's totally fine. Yeah, inversion is tricky. I will fully acknowledge that. Luckily, we're going to look at a little bit of inversion stuff today, but we're not going to get much more complicated on inversion than this. So we'll still have some more time to kind of to work on this. And if you want more inversion practice, I'll make another plug in the middle of class here. I have office hours today if you would like, and you have some more inversion practice on your homework this week too. So let's try this one out again. Okay, so now we're in a minor key, D minor. We have 4 notes, so one of them is going to be probably repeated. So look for the unique pitches, arrange those pitches to find your root position, whatever your root position triad is, your snowman form, if you will. Identify the quality, the Roman numeral, and the inversion. So take a minute and a half, try this out. Okay, let's try this out. What is the lead sheet symbol for this chord? What is the lead sheet symbol for this chord? I see G minor over B flat. Okay, other guesses? Other responses, same responses, different responses. Okay, I see some consensus. Other thoughts? Okay, indeed. From the bottom, we've got B flat, D, G, and B flat. Well, one of those B flats is extra. Don't worry about it. We have G, D, and B flat. If we arrange those, we would get that it's a G flat chord, because G flat would be on the bottom if this were in a snowman form. So it's a G chord of some kind, a G minor chord specifically. G up to B flat to minor third, G up to D is perfect fifth. B flat's in the bass, so G minor over B flat, lead sheet's good to go. Converting that into a Roman numeral, well, we go D, E, F, G. So this is the 4 chord in D minor, but it's in second, pardon me, beg your pardon, so sorry. It's in first inversion because B flat is in the bass. So that looks like that. G minor over B flat, 4 in first inversion. So I have 2 more of these to do, and you can see A major up here already, so feel free to start on that if you like. Does anybody have any questions before we proceed? Okay, try this one out. A major, note the clef. We're in a different clef now. A major, there's your 3 notes. They're spaced quite far apart. So the odds that we're going to have all the chords of a triad are pretty good, but we need to rearrange them to be more compact so we can identify what the root is. So try this one out. Take another minute and a half. Okay, let's skip to the Roman numeral this time. What is the Roman numeral and inversion for this chord? What do we got? Okay. I see 4, second inversion. No, 5. Okay. Other guesses? Same guesses, different guesses. What do we got? I see 6. I see 6 first inversion. Okay, there's a bit of a spread here. Let's take a look at this. So let's start from the beginning. We have 3 notes. We have A, we have F sharp, we have C sharp. Pardon me. Yeah, A, F sharp, C sharp. So let's rearrange these. Well, if we take F down an octave, we still have this big gap. But if we take A up an octave, we would get our snowman form here. If A is on this line, we can kind of rearrange it that way. That gives us F sharp, A, and C sharp. F sharp is the root. A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp. This is a 6 chord, a 6 chord of some kind. F sharp to A is minor. F sharp to C sharp is perfect. This is a minor chord, so it's a minor 6 chord. So we would have F sharp over A. If it's F sharp, A, C sharp, A is the third of the chord. It's the middle note of our snowman form. So this is in first inversion. That looks like this. 6, first inversion, F sharp minor over A. So try one more. A minor, good old neutral key signature. Beware of accidentals. There's accidentals in your MUS. So take a look at this chord. Take another minute and a half. Try this one out. Okay. Let's try this one out. Give me lead sheet symbols for this one first. Give me lead sheet symbols for this one. What is the triad? And it's over what note? Lead sheet symbols. Okay. I see one guess in the chat. Same responses, different responses? Does anybody agree or disagree? Good. Yeah, it wasn't a ton of time. I acknowledge that. So I apologize. I just want to keep things moving here. Great. It is, in fact, a G sharp diminished over D. Here's why. Luckily for us, we can kind of see the snowman form here already. We've got G sharp, we've got B, we've got D, and then D's repeated down here. Well, G sharp up to B is a minor third. G sharp up to D is a diminished fifth. This is what we get when we raise scale degree 7 in a minor key. We get a diminished chord, G sharp diminished over D. If the fifth is in the bass, if the D is doubled down here and is the lowest pitch, it's in second inversion. So 7 diminished, second inversion. Okay, so for the sake of time, let's go ahead and move on. We will have some more time to work on inversion. We'll look at a little bit of inversion today, but we're not going to be assessed on anything more than this. Is it 2 diminished, not 7 diminished? It is 7. It's 7 because A, B, C, D, E, F, G. It's the 7th scale degree of A minor. The 2 chord is also diminished. If it were a B chord, it would also be diminished, but this isn't a B chord, it's a G sharp chord. So because of when we raise up scale degree 7, it's possible to have 2 different diminished chords in a minor scale context. Yeah. Okay, so chordal extensions. What the heck are chordal extensions? So far we looked at a very specific type of chord. Remember, a chord is just any 2 or more different pitches done at the same time. So we've looked at a very specific kind of chord, the triad, specifically triads built on thirds. We can take the same principle of stacking thirds to add more pitches to our chords. Chordal extensions are thirds added above a triad to add more notes to a chord. Now, this actually sounds more complicated than it is. In particular, we're going to spend some time today looking at 4-note chords because they're very, very common, extremely common. But with this principle, we can create diatonic chords with up to 7 notes. If you were to keep stacking thirds, you would eventually get every single note in your scale, but just stacked all on top of each other in like space like that. So the possibilities here get quite intricate quite quickly. So we're going to focus primarily on these 4-note chords that I mentioned, but we'll also at the end talk briefly about the other options. So 7th chords. The name we use for a 4-note chord built by stacking thirds is called a 7th chord. Why is it called a 7th chord? We call them 7th chords because the interval we add to the chord from the root is a 7th of some kind. So we have root, 3rd, 5th, and now 7th. And that looks a little bit like this. So here's your 7th chord over here, and I've broken it up for you. The word for that is arpeggiation, but it's not a huge deal. I've broken this up for you. We have a 3rd from the root, we have a 5th from the root, and now we have a 7th from the root. That's how we get 4 notes. And if you look in between adjacent notes, you can see the thirds that I'm talking about. That's what I mean by stacking thirds. So this is kind of an anatomy of a 7th chord. That's what they look like. 4 unique notes stacked on top of each other like that. Unsurprisingly, we have qualities for 7th chords. Now, there's good news and bad news. The good news is that these are pretty straightforward. When identifying 7th chords and their qualities, we treat the triad as its own entity. We do what we've already been doing. We look at the triad at the bottom, the root, 3rd, 5th on its own. And then we look at the 7th as a separate entity. And then we combine those 2 things to give us the 7th chord quality. So the bad news is that we'll have more types of 7th chords than triads, but we don't add 7ths usually to augmented chords. So this reduces the options a bit. So we have 4 triad qualities. We're going to have 6 7th chord qualities, but we'll go through each of them in tandem here. It's not that bad, actually. Let's start off with what happens when you add a seventh to a major triad. If you take a major triad and add a major seventh from the root, right? So we have C, E, G is a major chord, C up to B natural is a major seventh. This is called a major seventh chord, major seventh chord. And the lead sheet symbol looks like this. You have your floating C, and then you do major seventh to show that this is a major seventh. A major triad plus a minor seventh is what's called a dominant seventh chord. So you can see C, E, G, and now B flat. It's a minor seventh. This is called a dominant seventh chord. The reason why it's called a dominant seventh will become clear in future classes, specifically tomorrow. It's the only one that's going to be kind of weird to remember. Dominant seventh chord. And its lead sheet symbol looks like this. You may be going, well, wait a second. Why is this just a floating C? Why is it just a floating seven? What happened? Dominant seventh chords are our most common version of seventh chords. So over time, we've just simplified to, we have a triad, and then if we add a floating seven to it, that means it's a dominant seventh chord. And I will review all of these chord qualities in a table at the end, so don't worry. For any major chord with a seventh, the Roman numerals only need a floating seven next to it if all notes are diatonic. Now, the good news is for seventh chords is that for Roman numerals, if the notes you have are diatonic, you've achieved them by just adding thirds in whatever your key is. All you do is just add a seven to your Roman numeral for the most part. There's a couple exceptions we'll get to, but it's pretty straightforward actually. So C major seven versus C dominant seven. So two of our 6 options here, major triads and 2 different options we get from adding a seventh to it. Minor triads. If we add a minor triad plus a minor seventh, so minor plus minor, we get a minor seventh chord. That's pretty straightforward. Minor plus minor equals minor. And its lead sheet symbol looks like this. C minor, and then add a 7 to it. Because again, the floating 7 means it's a minor seventh usually. So C minor is our chord, floating 7. C to E flat to G is a minor triad. C up to B flat is a minor seventh. Now, a less frequent chord, a very interesting chord, but a less frequent chord, is a minor triad plus a major seventh. And because we are extremely creative and original people, we call this minor major seventh chords. Minor chord, major seventh. Minor, major seventh. C, E flat, G, and then a B natural, C up to B natural. And the chord isn't as common, but its lead sheet symbol looks like this. We do C minor, and then we put major seventh in parentheses to show that it's a major seventh, not a minor seventh. And please feel free to stop me if there's any questions so far. We're kind of blazing through a lot of terms here pretty quickly. For any minor chord with a seventh, the Roman numeral only needs to be a floating 7 to it if the notes are all diatonic. Same situation. If all of your pitches are diatonic, if it's a Roman numeral, you just need to add just a 7 next to the Roman numeral. And we'll look at this later, so don't worry, we'll see this again. Let's talk about diminished triads. Diminished seventh chords are famously tricky. I'm just gonna put that out there right now. Diminished seventh chords are gonna be a little particular. A diminished chord plus a minor seventh is called a half diminished chord. So as you can see here, we have C, E flat, G flat, that's your diminished triad. C up to B flat, that's your minor seventh. Half diminished. And to show that it's half diminished, we use this symbol. And we actually use the same symbol for Roman numerals too. By putting a slash through our little lowercase 0, our little lowercase o, we show that this is half diminished. Now you may go, well, why the heck is it half diminished? What the heck does half diminished mean? Well, it's because when we compare it to a fully diminished seventh chord, it's quite different. A fully diminished seventh chord is a diminished triad plus a diminished seventh. Sometimes, unfortunately, you get some pretty gross notes like this, a B double flat. The reason why this is fully diminished is because every single note is a minor third from the next one. We've lowered every third as low as we can basically get. And it's also there's a variety of reasons that we just can't get into right now as to why this is fully diminished. But this is the fully diminished version. Diminished plus diminished is fully diminished. diminished plus a minor seventh is half diminished. Now, luckily for us, for a fully diminished seventh chord, we just add a 7 to our traditional comfortable lowercase o. And we use the same symbols for Roman numerals. So now, any questions now? Diminished chords are always a little particular. Feel free to stop me. I believe I have a table here that summarizes everything. Here you go. Here is all the info. And again, I will, as always, post these slides to Gotcha Space. Here's all the info. These are the names of these chords. These are the triads plus the sevenths of these chords, and these are the lead sheets for these chords. Now, you may be going, well, hold on a sec. What about a minor triad plus a diminished seventh? Or what about a diminished triad plus a major seventh? There's other options that are not going to be on this table, and that's because they're not used very often. For the sake of keeping things simple, I've tried to pare down to the ones that you will see in the wild relatively frequently. These 6 are the ones that you see the most often. However, there are other combinations out there. So that's something that you could always look at in the future. So here is a table for your reference. It's all the info that we've just gone through step by step. So feel free to reference this or copy this down later from the slides if you would like. And then there's your lead sheet symbols all for C. You would just change C to whatever your root of your chord is, and that would be how you would get that. Any questions on seventh chord qualities? Speak now or forever hold your peace, because we're about to do some practice, everybody. Sevenths are the last kind of chord. Root position seventh chords are the last kind of chord we're going to really try to dig into. So let's do some practice on that. Seventh chord qualities. Try this out. Look at the quality of the triad, then look at the quality of the seventh. Think back to the table and what we just talked about in step, and try to identify the type of seventh chord. These are all going to be root position. There is no inversional trickery here. So I don't really need, honestly, you can give me lead sheet symbols. It doesn't really matter. I just need to know what the kind of seventh chord is. So let's try 30 seconds. If we need more time, just let me know. 30 seconds. Let's talk through this first one. G to B flat to D. What quality is that triad? Ignore the seventh right now. What quality is G, B flat, and D? What chord is that? Major, minor, augmented, diminished. And hint, you're not going to see augmented here. Okay, great. Indeed, it's minor. That narrows it down. Hooray. Is it a minor seventh chord or a minor major seventh chord? It's down to one of two options. What do you think? Okay. G up to F is a minor seventh, minor triad plus a minor seventh. This is a minor seventh chord, and I've given you the lead sheets there. Try this one out. Try this one out. So again, sevenths can get kind of tricky business. So take it in chunks. Look at the triad and then look at the seventh chord. So take a minute for this one. Would we like some more time? Type yes or no in the chat. And again, feel free to private message me if you want. I see yes. Sure thing. No problem. 30 more seconds. Okay, I'll talk through this one too. F sharp, A, C. If we were to look at that a little bit, we'd find that that is a diminished triad. F sharp to A is a minor third, F sharp to C is a diminished fifth, diminished triad. F sharp to E flat. Now, in the key of F sharp major, it should be E sharp. In the key of F sharp minor, it should be E natural. And if we lower a minor interval by a half step, we get a diminished interval. So E flat is a diminished seventh. Diminished triad plus diminished seventh. This is a fully diminished seventh chord. Any questions on that? Do we get anything radically different? Okay. I'm going to take that quick silence as a no. Try this one out now. Try this one out. Take a minute for this one. Okay. Let's take some guesses. What do we got? What kind of seventh chord is this one? I see minor major. Okay, other guesses? Also minor major. Indeed. Excellent job, everybody. It's an A minor triad with a G sharp. That's a major seventh. Minor, major, seventh. Excellent. Try this one out. Take a minute. What do we got? F, A, C, E flat. What seventh chord is this? Okay. Okay. F, A, C is a major chord. F up to E flat is a minor seventh, major chord plus minor seventh. Indeed, it's a dominant seventh chord. The lead sheet symbol is just an F with a floating seven. Yep, correct. Great. Try this one out. Any guesses on this one? I didn't give us much time, but what do we think? G, B flat, D flat, and F. What do we got? I see half diminished. Other guesses? Other half diminished. G, B flat, and D flat is a diminished triad. G up to F is a minor seventh. Diminished triad plus minor seventh. Half diminished. We use a little lowercase o with the slash through it. Every time I type that, I have to just Google it and copy and paste it. If you're writing it, it's a piece of cake. So here we go. One more. One final one. Yeah, take a minute. One final one. Okay. For the more meta game playing savvy ones of you out there, process of elimination is kind of pointing towards one option. What do we think this is? B flat, D, F, and A natural. What seventh chord is this one? B flat, D, F, and A natural. What seventh chord is this one? I see major seventh, major seventh, major seventh. Indeed, B flat, D, and F, that's a major triad. B flat up to A natural, that's a major seventh. Major triad plus major seventh is a major seventh chord. There we go. Okay, I'm sure there are questions. Does anybody want to ask anything now? We will have some more examples today and keep looking at some seventh chords in context. Oh yeah, so question about review. So the difference between half diminished and fully diminished. Fully diminished is a diminished chord plus a diminished seventh. Diminished chord plus diminished seventh. Half diminished is a diminished chord plus a minor seventh. Yeah, they're both diminished chords. The triad is really what describes the quality the most. The seventh is kind of just a color we add on top of it. So they're both types of diminished chords. One is fully diminished, it's got a diminished seventh to it, and one is not quite all the way there, it's only half diminished. And we'll see the context where we would see either one of them in a moment. So good question. Let's go ahead and take a look right now at diatonic seventh chords. So from here, I'm just going to tell all of you right now, for the rest of today, everything is kind of just an FYI situation. Being able to identify a root position seventh chord is the meat of what we'll be doing on assignments and things like that. Here on out, we're just going to look at seventh chords in a variety of contexts because we just don't have the time to do a ton of detail, but I want to show you where these things come from because you'll see them in music that you listen to. Diatonic seventh chords. Just like with triads, we can build a seventh chord in diatonic keys on every single scale degree. This gets complicated quick, so we'll just take a brief look at this. Notice that instead of doing a triad, I've now added a seventh to each of these chords. And we'll take the triads that we're used to, major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished, and now add sevenths to them. Now, Roman numerals are a piece of cake. Roman numerals, barring the diminished two, it doesn't matter if it's major seventh, dominant seventh, minor major seventh, minor seventh, doesn't really matter. Unless it's diminished, your Roman numeral just has a floating seven next to it. It's pretty simple, but it means that the differences can be hard to spot. So I always recommend putting the lead sheet symbols above two. One chord is a major seventh, the two chord is a minor seventh, three chord is also a minor seventh. 4 chord is a major seventh, 5 chord is a dominant seventh, the 1 dominant seventh in the key here. 6 chord is a minor seventh. The 7 chord is half diminished. In this case, B, D, and F is a diminished triad. B up to A is a minor seventh, half diminished, and then 1 again. And again, you're not going to need to be able to reproduce any of this, but this is, again, just something to kind of, you can do this with a scale if you encounter a 7th chord and want to know how it interacts with other chords in a piece. In addition, we can do minor. Unsurprisingly for all of you at this point, minor gets a little complicated. Here's the parallel minor key. Here's C minor. 1 is a minor seventh, 2 is a half diminished, and so on. If you recall, all of our kind of qualities flip to being almost like the relative major. So if we think of like E flat major, it's the same qualities basically, but with different Roman numerals. The issue with minor, of course, becomes where we raise scale degree 7. Now, we're not going to talk about 3 because, again, augmented 3 doesn't really happen that often, but we do get 5/7, a dominant 7th, and we do get a fully diminished 7th chord by raising scale degree 7 on the scale degree 7 chord. So, again, this is kind of becoming lightning round music theory as we approach the end. I'm just trying to give kind of a variety of different things that you may encounter in a variety of different circumstances. This is the general gist of it. Any major key is going to have this progression of 7th chords if you build a 7th chord from every diatonic scale degree. And this is the progression for minor chords, factoring in these 2 odd options. So, questions on diatonic 7th chords? Okay. Oh no, inversion is back. Just like triads, we can invert 7th chords. Now, because 7th chords have 4 pitches instead of 3, we actually have 3rd inversion as an option. We will not go into this into excruciating detail, but I want to show you this because it creates some really interesting notes, get really kind of compact, because the process for identifying the root of the 7th chord and writing it is the same as for triads. Finding your snowman form, your snowman's just got an extra torso now. But the thing is because 7ths invert to seconds, if you recall all the way back from our interval week, we now have seconds kind of that appear. So 7th chords look kind of distinctive when they're in inversions like this, because we get a second. What I mean is root position, if E flat goes up an octave, well, now we have D against E flat. G up an octave, B flat's in the bass, B flat up an octave, D is in the bass, and so on. Root position, 1st inversion, 2nd inversion, 3rd inversion. Just like with the chords last week, in my supplemental video, I talked about ways that we can use Roman numerals to talk about these types of inversions, but if you're not a music major, I wouldn't worry about it. At this point, if you are a music major, I would revisit that video from last week and check this out because I talk about this kind of property. So we can invert 7th chords. It does happen a lot. It happens as much as it happens for any other chord. It's just it gets tricky, and I would rather us be expert in triadic inversion and just know that 7th chords can be inverted and leave it at that. So that is inverting 7th chords. Questions? And it's okay if we do, and it's okay if we don't. Okay. Let's look at a piece. There is kind of an exception chord, and there's 2 pitches I want you to ignore for right now. This is a very famous piano sonata, and it alternates between triads and 7th chords. 7th chords, as I describe it there, are sprinkled in. So 7th chords and triads can often be used interchangeably. The triad is what makes kind of the most sense musically. So 7ths are often just kind of added on top to certain chords to make them more interesting, to give more tension, more color. It's kind of just up to the composer's intention. So you'll often see a mixture of both in actual music. The music that we've been looking at in class, I've tried to focus specifically on music that's been with triads, but for things you find for listening journals, you want to write about for your final paper, things like that, you'll see a mixture of 7th chords with triads all the time. For the sake of keeping things simple, I'm not going to give us Roman numerals. We don't need to worry about that. Here's the lead sheet symbols. I have taken the liberty of providing the inversions for the 7th chords where needed. Inversions for 7th chords work the same as for triads, of course, where you just have whatever the chord is and then slash and whatever's in the bottom. So we're in the key of A flat major. We have A flat, E flat 7, A flat, E flat 7, A flat, E flat. And what we find is that we actually have a pretty regular recurring of an A flat chord, an E flat chord, an A flat chord, an E flat chord, and so on. We just keep changing what's in the bass as the melody changes. So the melody is this top line up here. Most music is like this. In really any genre, most music is like this. A mixture of triads and seventh chords, often an inversion, supporting a melody. We'll talk a little bit tomorrow and more on Wednesday about why you would use inversions and where you would use inversions. But the short answer is that it just makes the music more smooth and connected instead of just jumping around from A flat to E flat to A flat to E flat and so on. So the first half here is pretty straightforward. We do have a B flat 7 chord because we have an accidental here that's out of our key, but with lead sheet cymbals, that's no problem. We do have diminished chords. We have a half diminished chord. We have a dominant chord, a minor triad, and then another dominant chord. We'll just ignore this thing here. So this is just to kind of show you what doing a kind of measure by measure kind of analysis with lead sheet symbols looks like. You could also go through and do Roman numerals if you liked. There's a couple chords we don't know how to talk about yet. For instance, the B flat 7 over F and the F7. But we'll talk about that stuff briefly on Thursday. So this is 8 measures, and every single chord barring one is accounted for because we know now how to write about sevenths. So this passage, this music you've maybe heard before, it's used in a lot of media. It's a very, very famous piece. It's by Beethoven. It's his 8th piano sonata. It's the 2nd movement. So go ahead and listen for that. Basically, every single, like the first 2 measures is just 2 chords over and over again. But what keeps changing is what's in the top with the melody changing and what's in the bottom with the bass changing. So let's go ahead and listen to these 8 measures here. So yeah, that's basically an entire phrase, an entire portion unit of the melody. Again, I'm not going to be expecting any of you to go into necessarily this much detail with your lead sheet symbols or to do your Roman numerals. I will say that if you're doing your final paper on a piece like this, you could try and talk about what you know about. But this is kind of an example of what we can do now that we know what 7th chords are. Whole components of a variety of music are now opening up, whereas triads we were kind of restricted to kind of certain examples here and there. We can basically understand most anything now as far as what the chords being used are. So any questions on the example I have on screen right now, or any other comments, feedback, things like that? And it's okay if you do, and it's okay if you don't. Okay. We've talked a lot about 7th chords. 7th chord, 7th chord, 7th chord, 7th chord, and so on. Those are 4-note chords. But I did talk in the beginning about extensions as a concept, which includes more than 4-note chords. So let's take a look at the other extension options. Not in any amount of detail. Again, more of just a survey of the possibilities we get by adding extra extensions on top of our triad. If we keep adding notes, we tend to think in terms of stacking thirds upwards. What happens is if you go a third above a 7th, though, you get numbers and labels bigger than an octave. It's like, what do you mean by that? Sometimes you'll see numbers, chords perhaps, that are labeled things like 9 or 13 or 11. It's like, what the heck is a 9? Well, the reason for that is because if we stack on thirds, we have root, 3rd, 5th, 7th. If we think of this interval, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, we keep going up that way. So we don't generally call chords a 2 chord, a 4 chord, even though if you look at this like their scale degrees, This is scale degree 2, scale degree 4, scale degree 6. We just don't really think of things that way. And the reason why is because if you see a chord that's labeled 9, a floating 9, it's going to have a root, a third, a fifth, a seventh, and a 9 in it. So it has all the ones that came before. And if you just put a 2, that kind of suggests something different. So you see these particularly in genres that are more harmonically adventurous, like jazz, but by proxy, you also see them a lot sampled in things like hip hop. You also see them in prog rock, all over the place if you look hard enough for it. Although having more than 4 notes in a chord can get kind of unwieldy depending on the circumstance, but that does happen from time to time, including in like pop hits will sometimes have as many as 6 or 7 unique notes in a chord. Notice that when we get up to the 15th, so to speak, it's just an octave again. We get back up to C again. If we were to start stacking thirds on top of that, we would just get notes that we've had already. So it only goes up to 16, or pardon me, up to 13. Our numbers only go to 13. So 9, 11, 13, 3 other options on top. I cannot emphasize enough how little detail we're going to go into on these types of chords. It is only to illustrate, like if you pull up a lead sheet of something, say it's, like J-pop, for instance, is very inspired by jazz harmony. So if you look up a piece that's J-pop, you're going to find jazz chords in it. So you may see ninths in the wild, especially for a listening journal or a thing like that. So I just want to kind of give you like a little bit of slide of contextualization, just so you see what that's all about. Speaking of jazz, let's take a look at jazz, because I like to think of jazz for classes like this as kind of the genre of extensions. You can find extensions everywhere if you look for them, but some genres, particularly jazz, are saturated with extensions. Every single chord will have at least a 7th, if not multiple extensions upwards. Jazz is an example where every chord is extensions of some kind, like I just said. We can recognize at this point most of these lead sheet symbols. There's only a couple we can't. We don't know what the heck a sus is. We're not going to get into that right now, but we recognize almost everything else. So this piece gives us a veritable tour of extensions, both on the page, but also as we listen, because it starts out simple, gets more complicated, and then kind of reduces at the end. So we can see chords like we can see 9s, A flat 9. So that means that there's a root, third, fifth, 7th, and 9th in there. It's a 5-note chord at least. We see 7ths, 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 7ths everywhere. This starts as a simple melody in octaves. This is just a lead sheet, and it's not a terribly detailed lead sheet at that. You will hear the entire ensemble just play in octaves. As they play this 16-bar passage, this B section, you get more complicated chords. You see this in the lead sheet. You see 7th chords. You see chords change more often, and you'll hear more instruments playing harmony, playing other notes of the chord alongside the melody. Here, and the lead sheet just gives up as a heads up, there's an extreme use of extension. So listen for it. It's going to be very kind of, the word I like to use is crunchy, very kind of lots and lots of voices, and it kind of ripples a bit. It's quite dissonant is another word that we would use. And then at the C section here, it simplifies back again to something more like the B section. So we kind of get a tour of simple octaves, 7th chords, extreme 9s, 11s, 13s, whatevers, and then back to 7th chords again. So this is a big band piece. So listen for the horns in particular. There is an introduction. So listen for when the saxophones come in. They'll start off right here. So let's go ahead and listen to this. It's about 1.5 minutes. So yeah, there's a lot going on in that, but hopefully you kind of could see what I mean. It starts off simpler, gets more complicated, and then gets really complicated and then comes back again. If you're not entirely hearing what I mean, that's totally fine. There's another version of this where it has all of the parts written out. When we get to this part, it's like 6 or 7 notes all clumped together on the score like this, and they just kind of move around like this with the melody. So it's really, really, really dense. So I was hoping to keep it simple. Anyways, so that is just extensions in a nutshell. A little bit more, you know, what you can see beyond just 7th chords. Let's end here for today. Let's talk about what we're going to do next time. So tomorrow is going to be, in my opinion, a very fun day, because I keep kind of saying this over and over again, but it really is getting to that point. We've covered lots and lots of the nuts and bolts basics, and tomorrow we're going to talk about chord progressions. So common diatonic progressions you'll see in a variety of different contexts. We'll be talking about everything from classical music to 50s doo-wop to pop rock to all kinds of stuff, because we're going to finally talk about, like, well, what are the chords you want to use if you're writing a piece of music? The chords you pick and the order you put them in really matter depending on the kind of music you're writing. So we'll talk about that a little bit tomorrow and continue those discussions through the end of the week. So with that, today was a kind of jam-packed day. At this point, there are some 7th chords on your homework assignment this week. And your homework assignment also has a little bit of composition practice on it that kind of goes along with what we're doing today and tomorrow. There's also some inversion practice on there as well. So I will have office hours today, so stop by if you need anything or if you want to, you know, ask any questions. Don't forget you have a listening journal due tonight. And with that, take care, everybody, and I will see you all tomorrow.